do this work together. So hopefully we could get the whole school on board.
So last week we had our Spirit Week organized by the Student Council, and then for the Spirit Week, day 1 was Twin Day, day 2 was Hawaiian or Beach Day, and then day 3 was Barbie Hammer Day, and then we had Musical Fest and Odyssey wherein the seniors get to wear togas, and we all wear togas for me and Mason.
Yeah, I think this is like really building like a new culture at Odyssey. Like after COVID, it was like a little bit of a mess, but like last year and this year was like we're starting to establish a new culture, and togas have been a tradition at Odyssey for a while, so this is like a revival of like what like school is supposed to be about, having fun. And yeah, this was like a really exciting week, and I know as a senior I want to have a good year, so I enjoyed that a lot. And then me and Jason are both student council members, and so this week, especially with Spirit Week, we both contributed to setting up the gymnasium for a pep rally on Friday. We stayed after school for a Thursday meeting, and we discussed like who we're gonna elect as to represent us. So, yeah.
Yeah. To add what he was saying, yeah, we stayed after school. We decorated. We hung up balloons. We hung out, and we're just trying to build so we can make the school better. So I actually did the concession stand for the middle school dance, and I think it actually helped bring everybody together and just have some fun for the start of the school year. Like the games, like everybody was playing together, everybody was getting along, and it was just nice to see that because past few years everybody hasn't been getting along, but COVID messed that up, and we're just trying to get back to it.
So yeah, this is just one of the pictures from our toga day, and as you can see, like this is like our seniors especially have really become like a community. The class of 2024 getting along very well, and like we're all just trying to have a great year. So yeah, this is just one example of how we're making it fun and being in school. Here's the administrators joining in on the fun. Like everybody's getting involved, making it really seem like a family at Odyssey, and like it doesn't always have to be so serious and strict. Like we're a family here, so we're all in it together.
And now we have our sports, our senior night. We have volleyball, we have football, and that is intertwined with the Olympia team. And it's very organized, nice, and it's beautiful to see everybody come together, especially after COVID. Everyone come together and support the teams.
As you can see, our teachers are joining in on the Twin Day too. I really wanted to twin with Mr. Hepburn, but he got to stick to his suits. School spirit, we're just trying to get the school spirit back to what it was before, and we're gonna build that. Make sure before I graduate that the school is back to normal. We thank you for your time. I hope you guys all have a good night.
Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it, but I'm going to make you do a picture with the board. We're going to do a picture over here, so if you guys can come up. Dr. Hepburn, if you can join us in the picture, we'd appreciate it. Come on. Yep, the whole board. The whole board.
Ready? I'm just gonna take a couple rapid fire. Perfect. Thank you.
Our next item is, I'd like to recognize a couple Olympia students who are here this evening. If they would like to step up here. You guys can come right up front here. I'm gonna make you come right up in front. And I'm gonna apologize now if I butcher your names. You both can hit me, so it's fine if I do. We are thrilled tonight to celebrate two Olympia 12th grade students, Alani Siaka Johnson and Sarakira Mafai Nami. Not bad. You said it way better than I did. And recognize them for the great work they've been doing. Their hard work and commitment to their academics, as well as their strong performance on either the PSATs or on AP exams, have earned them the College Board's National African American Recognition Award. There's so much that makes our students unique, and receiving this honor reinforces this as an asset of their future. The criteria for eligible students are: they must have a GPA of 3.5 or higher, the PSAT assessment scores are within the top 10% of the assessment takers in each state for each award program, or they've earned a score of 3 or higher on 2 or more AP exams in 9th and 10th grade. They attend school in a rural or small town, or identify as African American, Black, Hispanic American, Latino, or Indigenous Native. Alani and Sarakira, this is not an easy accomplishment. Your community and your school district are extremely proud of you. Congratulations to both of you. And I'm gonna make you guys do a picture too. We're gonna do a picture with the board and your, since the whole Olympia staff turned out, I'm gonna make you guys do a picture again. I love Olympia's passion. So we'll do a quick picture over here with the board and all the Olympia staff up here.
All right, ready? Ladies. Thank you.
And if you guys want to sneak out, I know you probably have homework to do or things you need to do, now would be a great time if you want to sneak out. Congratulations again. It's a well-deserved honor, and thank you. Moving on, item 2.01, can I have somebody move staffing to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Flores, seconded by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, or concerns on staffing? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 7-0. Assistant Superintendent Larson.
Wonderful, thank you. I would like to welcome tonight our new House Assistant Principal, Courtney Afarian. Courtney attended St. John Fisher University for her bachelor's degree in psychology and her master's degree in special education. She attended the University of Rochester for her Certificate of Advanced Study in School Building Leadership and School District Leadership. Prior to working in Greece, Courtney worked in Phoenix, Arizona as a middle school special education teacher and a third grade teacher. She also worked in Charlotte, North Carolina as a third grade teacher and in Rochester as a preschool special education teacher. Courtney's favorite part of the job is forming relationships with her students and their families. She's looking forward to growing as a leader and educator in Greece. There are many people who work in Greece that Courtney admires and respects, and she is excited to collaborate and learn from her colleagues. Outside of work, Courtney enjoys spending time with her family and friends, traveling and working out and running. Courtney lives in West Irondequoit with her husband Brian, their 7-year-old son, their 2-year-old twin girls, and their family dog. Courtney is very excited to continue her career with Greece. Congratulations, Courtney.
Courtney, I'm gonna make you do a picture with Superintendent Groutman and Dr. Payne. So we'll come over here. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We gotta get something, we gotta jazz up that slang. Moving on, item 2.02, non-unit rate sheet. Can I move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Flores, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor? That passes 7-0. Moving on, 2.03 to Jewel agreement. Can I move that to the table, please? Moved by Vice President Malloy, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor? That passes 7-0. Moving on to 2.05, 2.04, GTA MOAs. Can I have somebody move those to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Butler, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on those? Seeing that all is in favor? That passes 7-0. And can I have somebody move item 2.05, the 913 resolution to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Bonagorio, second by Ms. Flores. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing that all is in favor? That passes 7-0. Item 3.01, opening of schools update, Superintendent Groutman.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to sit right here because I just have a quick oral report for everyone. What I'd like to do is just start by sharing a video that was put together that was shared on opening day for our staff. So our extended cabinet really came together to make sure to recognize the work that was done over the summer. So I want to start just by recapping that and sharing that with people, and then also giving an update around now the first week and a half of school. So we'll go ahead and start with the video. Oh, is it going to be no audio? Is it still no audio? I wasn't sure if it was just a thing for, we'll double. If not, we can. No audio. Okay. So we're not going to talk about that video. We're going to move right on. The video was beautiful, and actually it was a really creative way. One of the things that I had asked our cabinet to do was to think creatively around how they could work as a team to say thank you versus me standing up and going through multiple slides like I typically do. And as they typically do, they stepped up and did an amazing job in terms of coming up with a nice way to recognize and show our gratitude to all the different departments that worked over the summer. But let me just start by sharing the opening of school has been really incredible. It has been a really smooth opening to school. As the students shared with you at Odyssey, and what has happened in a number of our schools, is there was work done over the summer to really look at the physical entrances, how kids are entering the building, some low-hanging fruit in terms of how we can improve traffic flow patterns, systems, procedures, to make things go smoother, not only right as kids enter the building, but also throughout the day. So the principals have worked really hard to make some of those adjustments and changes, and what we have found is that it has been a really smooth opening, and that has really helped. So that's one part, but then they've also worked to ensure that they each have had presentations and assemblies with all of the different grade levels related to expectations, behavioral expectations across the school. So no matter where you are, whether you're at Arcadia or Olympia or Odyssey or Athena, your principals have been in front of you, really being clear around the expectations as we go forward for the school year. And that's something that won't just be done once, but it is something that will be done throughout the year and that consistently we've done across the board. I will say kids are in classrooms and there is learning happening. So kids are happy to be back. The only way I can describe it is if COVID felt like we were up here, we've come down a notch. Kids feel better. I think our staff feels better. There's a significant sort of feel in the schools that is a bit different this year, at least that I've noticed. Much of that same work around setting expectations is happening in our classrooms, so teachers are really focused on the first 6 weeks of school, making sure they're developing relationships, being clear around expectations in the classroom as well. And as you saw from the video or from the students from Odyssey, we've already started with Spirit Weeks, we've already started with field trips. Our special education students were able to get out to into the community, partnering with the Rochester Police Department to see the mounted police, which was pretty exciting. Our medical world has been busy, so our medical director, Mary Kay Perello, has been working to ensure that we have proper health care plans for our students, medications, and immunizations in place for all students. That is a lot of work on their department that starts off the year. Our leadership team has already started our weekly leadership meetings where we're doing professional learning, particularly focused on high-functioning teams. So we had about 100 of us in this room just last week, focused and led by Mark Fleming, who did an incredible job. Registrations have continued to come in, so we have kids registering even as we speak, I mean, right up until today, and they'll continue, but we have over 550 students since July 5th that have registered with us. So that makes us very, very busy because not only do kids register, but we're obviously getting them buses, we're making sure all their paperwork's complete, that we're getting them scheduled into classes. So that's a significant amount of work. We did encounter some issues with Infinite Campus the first few days, so there was some glitches within the cloud-based system, not just here in Greece, but that had an impact on some of the day-to-day operations with scheduling and registrations and things like that. The Office of Accountability has been busy. We have submitted over $6 million of grants that are all due at this time of year, and those are all for really specific supports and services to our students and families in need. Our food service is up and running really smoothly. We've added on 6 community eligibility schools this year. Our breakfasts are up 800 students in the morning, and lunches are up 600 students. So 800 more students are eating breakfast, 600 more are eating lunch. So it really shows that parents are taking advantage of this benefit. We have our warehouse they completed over 604 supply orders for classrooms that were delivered to classrooms and to teachers. And our facility use has been working with completing permits so that our schools are up and running and busy. Lots of people using, most of those are internal permits or people asking to use internal by our own staff, but about 100 of them are really from outside organizations that really come in and use our spaces throughout the year. Transportation was really happy because not only, while it's been difficult in terms of the driver shortage, we did a great job of routing this year, and what we found is our call center had a significant decrease in calls, particularly the first week of school, which is great, and that actually shows that we're being more efficient and getting things right in terms of those passes and stops, which has been great. We're still working on the driver shortage zone. We're still concerned about that because just like we were fully staffed at the beginning of school, we've already encountered illness or some people announcing retirements and so on. And then our Buildings and Grounds Department has been really, really busy. They work a ton of overtime to get our schools ready. They were beautiful, sparkly, shiny. Everything was in place and wonderful. The only thing that they have struggled with the opening of school was the hot temperatures and everyone asking for air conditioning. And then also bees, which seems like wouldn't be a big issue, but it has turned out to be a significant issue in a couple of the schools. So they've been on it in terms of partnering with us to help really mitigate that with principals. So they've been great partners as we've started the school year. And lastly, our HR department. Our HR department is working with a lot of 10-month employees who come back to school and need help with answering questions. So on top of all the hiring that they're doing throughout the summer and that they still continue to do here and there, they're really working with staff around their benefits, around oftentimes when they know that they have to have a surgery or a maternity leave. They're working with all of those individuals to answer questions, to make sure they have the right information and ensure that like our staff basically has everything that they need. So they have gone above and beyond as well. So my big takeaways when I asked, and I do this every year where I ask departments just to sort of report on how things went, was that it's been a really successful opening. And I think for me, the biggest evidence that I see of that is just kids in classrooms and learning. And as I've been around touring buildings, I see those physical changes that have been made. I've seen kids in their classrooms. I've seen, in general, just sort of a quieter demeanor when the kids talked about sort of this idea of calming things down. It feels nice, and kids are focused on learning. So I've been really happy about that. It's been a great opening, and if I have the video at some point, I'll show that to you too.
Thank you, Superintendent Groutman. 3.02, the risk management update, Superintendent Groutman.
Yeah, so risk management is a department that has not always existed in such a robust way here in Grace Central. Scott Moyer, who is going to be presenting to us tonight, I will just take a moment to recognize the fact that when Scott came on board, he has done an incredible job of sort of assessing Grace Central from a risk management perspective and really helping us to put things in place that have made us a safer organization, but have also saved us in terms of efficiency and significant dollars. So I proudly introduce Scott Moyer to you tonight. I know that the board has received a much fuller report from you earlier this summer, but I appreciate you being here today and giving us some of the highlights. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that introduction. I haven't had a lot of opportunities to come to the board meetings, but it's been a few years. I do want to take the opportunity to thank you all for your tireless work to support the district, both staff and students, and your work does not go unrecognized. Same to Kathy and the cabinet and extended cabinet. The partnerships that we formed over I've been here since 2015 and really done a lot of work, now I see that cabinet and extended cabinet are looking at things with a different lens than 7 years ago. There's things that are being identified and brought to me now that, 7 years later, that probably never even crossed their mind years ago. So I appreciate the partnership. Just as Kathy alluded to, we did send out a report back in July with pretty extensive information about our risk management process, the work that's done to basically identify risks and find solutions to manage them, to protect the district, to protect students. If there are any questions about that report, I'd be happy to answer them after this meeting or at any time by email or phone. Oops. I don't want to spend a lot of time on past practices because the past is the past, but to understand kind of where we've come, I want to just point out a few things about when I started here in 2015. The position was a little different than it is now, and a lot of that is due to identifying, I would say, weaknesses in the way that we managed our risks. We were very reactive to losses. So things would happen and we'd put out the fire and then we'd kind of forget about it and then there'd be another fire and we'd put it out. No pun intended with the fire, knock on wood. We were really focused on our claim filing process So we had a broker that we worked with, and they had a very stringent process that that's what our focus was, instead of looking at bigger picture as why are these claims happening. We were less proactive than we are now. I don't think we actively engaged as much with our school leadership and with higher level district leadership about kind of what was happening in the district. We didn't share as much information out as we should have been to kind of educate and try to bring an awareness to the risks and the losses that we had throughout the district. We were very paper-heavy, process-oriented, and we have since moved kind of in a, complete, what did I do? Home? Okay. Sorry about that. So when I started in 2015, I took a full year to evaluate. I was new to the school, working in a school district. I came from the private sector. I had to learn how things were done in the school district. So I spent a full year kind of understanding how we did things, why we did things, developed relationships with administrators, key support departments such as transportation, HR, technology, invested time into learning kind of the department operations. I actually sat on Friday afternoons down in transportation with the dispatchers just to kind of get a purview to what that world is like, so that I can understand why we did things how we did, how we responded to accidents. I rode along with our road patrol supervisor responding to accidents to understand why we did things like that and the way that we did them. And then I took feedback from those stakeholders and used that to develop new ways of doing things. After completing that work, I spent a lot of time developing ways to be proactive, preventing accidents, working individually with departments, spending time there at the time it was Dave Hathaway and FOP, and understanding what their concerns were, what types of things, training we needed for employees, what kinds of things we needed to do to be more proactive. I wanted us to be more of instead of a claim processor, we became more of a claims management, right? So we developed relationships with our carrier, we developed relationships with our third-party administrator who handles our workers' comp. Workers' comp was always my expertise and my background, so we created a lot of changes in our workers' comp program to manage our costs and to manage the risks. We improved systems to meet district needs. So one of the things we did, identified early on, is that accidents would occur and then risk management wouldn't find out till sometimes a week plus later because it was handwritten paperwork, sent interoffice mail, and so we implemented an electronic reporting process, I think within the first year or so. So that really helped speed up the process of getting claims filed. Expanding the reach of risk management. So again, I was meeting with different operational areas, but I started working with athletics and food services and really trying to understand their operations and how I could support them. Utilized and leveraged our relationships with our external partners. So, looking for resources available from our carrier, our insurance carrier, and taking advantage of those. Just some of the core functions. I think the board knows primarily what the core functions of risk management are. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of them. I mean, obviously, workers' comp is one of our biggest cost drivers in terms of claims. So we spent a lot of time managing claims. We hired Mary Jo Maxwell, who is supporting the risk management role, and she does a lot of work with workers' comp. Insurance renewal. So this is a short period of time and a short window into what I do, but understanding the renewal process and understanding how to leverage the marketing of insurance and using markets against each other to get a better premium is something that I work on a lot with our broker. Negotiating renewals, and then also auditing our insurance to make sure that all of our assets are covered by the policies. Most of the board members are probably familiar with the report that goes out monthly with an update on claim status. Typically, those are claims that we received for general liability. Well, those are generally like a third-party injury, a student that's injured, a member of the public who gets injured on our property. Those are third-party liability claims. I know you guys receive these every month, but we've never really had an opportunity to ask questions about, so I figured it would be good to spend a couple seconds on this. NYSER is our insurance carrier. They adjust the claims. They set the reserves on the claims. We have input and we work with them, but at the end of the day, they own the claim. So the numbers that are set in the reserves is the number that they use, that they're from their investigation into the claim and what they believe the liability is for the district and for the carrier. The middle section is our property claims. Those have primarily been wind event related, roofing claims since I've been here. And then at the bottom is our workers' comp claims. We are self-insured, so those numbers are set, the reserve numbers are set by our third-party administrator. And those can fluctuate month to month depending on whether claims are resolved or large payments are made. So moving forward, a lot of the work that has been done since I started is trying to transfer liability to another party that we're working with. And one of the key areas is in capital projects. I've worked with Lou Bianchi, and we've had established insurance requirements for our capital projects. However, we made some significant changes to protect the district. One being having the limits of the insurance that we require being contingent on the value of the work that's being done, and also on whether it's a one-story work or two-story work. There's specific requirements depending on the value and whether or not it would be one-story or two-story work. We also are requiring builder's risk, and this is really more of a protection for, it's really like insurance for a building that's under construction. So we don't own the building yet, the contractors are working on it. This would protect if, say, there was a fire, there was vandalism, that policy, which is purchased by the contractor, would pay for any of those damages. We also require an owner's and contractor's protective liability insurance, and this is something that's huge and that's actually already paid off for us that we require it. So this is the contractor purchasing a policy that covers the district for basically third-party liability. We had a contractor, electrical contractor, trip and fall on a job site, sued the district, sued LaChase. We had this OCP policy. We filed it with the OCP carrier, and they're now defending us, and they'll pay for the claim. So that's not something the district is incurring. I've also worked extensively with facility use to make sure that our facility use agreement has language that protects the district. We require insurance documents that make the district an additional insured on their policy. So if there is an event or an issue, again, we can transfer liability. And we've had incidents where an outside group is using our space and there's an injury, and we push any medical treatment or any claim to the facility user. Oops, I did it again. Sorry. I've also worked with Steve Chatterton, facility operations, and NYSER to make our buildings more safe and spend more time in our buildings inspecting for safety issues. So the fire department comes annually, but so does our insurance carrier. Our insurance carrier also comes out to all of our district safety meetings, the summer capital project safety meetings. They've come out to transportation safety committee meetings, and they are a great resource for us. Risk management has become a gatekeeper for all the contracts signed by the district. Typically, I'm looking at those contracts to identify risk to students, to district assets, reputational risk. We also look to vet the contractor employees. A lot of our community partners are bringing in either volunteers or they're bringing in their employees to work in our schools with our kids. So we want to make sure that they have fingerprints, background checks. We ask questions about whether they're going to be supervised or unsupervised in the buildings and with kids. And we tailor the contracts and the agreements to address those specific concerns. We also are looking at whether or not there's data being shared, student data or PII, and to ensure that the confidentiality of that data is being protected. We require them to fill out a data sharing agreement. We've also done a lot of work to support special events. One that when I first started, and someone told me, hey, we run a Tough Mudder at Grease Arcadia, and I'm like, a Tough Mudder? What? So as a risk manager, I'm thinking, you know, how can we possibly do this? So I joined the committee. I worked with Emil, and we evaluated all the risks associated with the event and whenever there's a new obstacle that's being added, he's coming to me for approval. We're talking about risks. I created a waiver of liability that has to be completed when they sign up. And actually, when I started, we were actually running that event on property that was not, we didn't have permission to run it on. So now everything is buttoned up, and we're making sure the event is still a fun, great event. It's a great community event, but it's also done in a safe way that protects the district. And just quickly, I think it was the second year, I got a call from Emil and said, hey, what do you think about adding electrical wires for everyone to crawl under, like it's a real Tough Mudder, like connect it to batteries? And I'm like, absolutely not. I've also assisted students with planning fundraising events. So we have students who are doing senior projects that want to raise money for their causes, and I've helped them to make sure that their event is run safely, that we have all the correct documents filled out, like waiver of liabilities and that kind of stuff. I've also become part of the overnight field trip approval process, so I'm looking at the submissions from the schools to make sure that we have adequate chaperone to student ratio. I assist in coordinating the charter buses. We've come up with a list of approved vendors to make it easier for the schools, so that could be food trucks, but also in this situation, charter bus companies. And I'm also looking to identify risks associated with the trip to make sure that we're addressing them correctly or appropriately. Collaborated with community schools quite a bit in developing partnerships and services to support students, especially with mental health services. We have Genesee Mental Health in our buildings. We've worked extensively with them on contracts and insurance. We've had dental care, behavior support programs, food pantry programs. And Kelly has learned my insurance requirements. I've made her an honorary member of the risk management department. And just one last thing, I've worked in parallel with technology, who's been partnered with Greg Castle for a few years now, trying to strengthen our data security program. And on the back end of that, I've been working really hard to make sure that we have the insurance to cover us in the event that we do have some sort of data breach. And with the markets kind of being harder to find policies, it's been a challenge, but I'm working with Tom and his team to make sure that when we're going through these applications, there's certain, for the insurance policies, there are certain things that are automatic no's, where if we don't have those, we can't answer yes, then we don't have an option of getting an insurance policy through these certain carriers. So we're working through what do we need to do to continue to be able to protect the district with insurance policies. I'm going to skip over these highlights. I just want to show a real quick graphic of the savings from 2015 to end of 2022. When I walked in the door, our first year, our workers' comp expenses were about $1.4 million. And ever since then, we've been down to mostly around under $1 million. We are starting to see a trend upward. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of them being the workers' comp rate set by the New York State has increased significantly. When I started, I think that the max rate was $844, and now it's $1,500. And the minimum rate was $150, and now it's going to $275. So just exponentially, claim costs are going up. But I'm proud of the savings that we were able to obtain. And then one other thing that I worked hard on was the recovering some of our COVID-19 expenses. Submitted a project through FEMA, requested almost $563,000, and to date we've been awarded $520,000 back. We have one project that was still in the pending review, the Emuware tracking software. That, we got a denial this week, and it's basically anything technology-related, software-related is not eligible. So that is where things will end up. Risk management, so on the horizon, I'm going to wrap up here quick. With the increase in this community school partnerships, we're working more and more with higher ed affiliations for students to be coming into schools. The increase in volume of contracts year over year just continues to increase. And with more and more that we're looking for in terms of data privacy and understanding the risks of vendors who are going to be using our data. We are exploring a contract management system to help us to streamline the process. That's something that we are doing right now. We're getting some demos. Looking to identify risks associated with vendors using our data. We increasingly are partnering, or I'm increasingly partnering with technology. As you see in the news, almost every week there's some sort of data breach, some other, phishing scam. It's an area that we're going to continue to be looking to innovate and protect the district. And then just one last thing, I pride myself in getting out to schools and walking buildings, but I'd like to be more present in some of our events so that I can see, see kids and see staff. So that's, any questions, comments?
Questions? Ms. Farah?
Hi, thank you. I just have a quick one.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Kathy a little bit regarding the Immuneware tracking software. It was a $42,000 expense, and it's not being reimbursed as of the denial, but we are going to possibly try again. Maybe? No?
I think it was denied.
Ah, okay. So I'm assuming then that wasn't a mandate, it was kind of like a requirement on our own that we took?
It was something to help us to manage the testing of staff. Instead of having to do it manually, and plus we had contract nurses who were using it, so it was just an easier tool for us to do it more efficiently. It wasn't a mandate, no.
Okay,
It was
good.
just a way to do it better.
Just a quick follow-up. Are we done with the software? Are we going to be tracking anymore?
I don't believe we were going to be.
Okay. If there's no renewal
think
or
we re- I
anything
don't think
like
we
that, it's
renewed
just a $42,000 expense, nothing
Right,
more is?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I asked them about appealing to FEMA, and we have a state rep or a local rep who basically said it's not worth your time because it's a technology and it's an automatic no.
One more follow-up question. Do you see that we'd be using this software for anything else in the future?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. 3.03, restorative work, Superintendent Groutman.
Yeah, so just to tie back to our last meeting, we did a presentation where we talked about our strategic plan and some key focus areas for us as we go forward this year. So one of the key focus areas that we talked about last year that we just gave sort of a big, broad introduction to was the idea of building restorative systems. So we have Dr. Zaffis, Dr. Baker, and Shannon Lane, one of our teachers, one of our phenomenal teachers, here tonight that are going to be presenting around some of the work that we have in store that we're planning for this year. And so our hope tonight, and I'll let them do the talking, but our hope tonight is to build sort of a better understanding of where we're headed with that work, and then recognizing, like I said last time that we presented, that we're going to be coming back multiple times throughout the year to give some updates in terms of this work, given it's a key priority area. So thank you for being here and for your work preparing.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. As Kathy mentioned, this is one of the first of a few touch points that we'll have on this key focus area this year. And we are going to spend a good deal of time talking with not only the board, but other stakeholders in the district this year about really what restorative practices are and defining that. And I also think it's worthwhile to spend a little time just talking about what they aren't as well, because there are some misconceptions out there about what they actually are and are not. So restorative practices, as we're defining them, as we're trying to implement them, it's not a walk down the hallway. It's not going to the assistant principal's office and getting a cookie. If you look at this graphic and this definition that we have in the strategic plan, restorative practices are practices that have high expectations and high levels of engagement. It really is a shift in responsibility and agency to those who are closest to a particular situation. And that can be a whole class, as you'll see as we get into the different tiers at Tier 1. And it can be as specific as an individual student or an individual staff member when we get into the higher tiers, like Tier 3. And when done well and done systematically, we really do believe that they will ignite learning and that they'll increase student achievement and other outcomes. Here is the definition of restorative practices that we have in the strategic plan. And you'll see that really foundational to this definition is the idea of community and relationships. And this is something that comes not just from our belief or a hunch, but really from the research. Last time the superintendent spoke about collective efficacy, she mentioned a researcher named John Hattie. Hattie is a researcher that conducts meta-analyses, really, and compiles research over the last 25 years from over 130,000 studies that really literally involve hundreds of millions of students, and takes all of those different characteristics of the schools that they're in and drills them down to what he calls an effect size. And an effect size of 0.4 means that whatever that intervention or practice is in the school equates to 1 year's worth of growth in student achievement. So the effect size for relationships, staff and student relationships, is a 0.53, so clearly above that 0.4. The same thing for a cohesive classroom at a 0.44. Those effect sizes indicate that when done with fidelity and when done systematically, those characteristics of a school will not only just meet that 1 year of growth, but they'll actually have the potential to really significantly accelerate student achievement. On the other hand, when we talk about behavior infractions in the code of conduct, schools that rely specifically and only on suspensions as their #1 method of discipline, the effect size for that is a -0.2, which actually means in practice that it has a substantial impact to the negative to decrease student achievement. So really, we've said this multiple times, but it's important to us that we find a way to complement traditional discipline without abandoning it, but really using the research and best practices that come along with building a solid community and relationships as that foundation. So, what are we doing this year with restorative practices? What we're really doing and what we're going to concentrate our efforts and communication on are the targeted approach to systemic restorative practices at 3 different schools: Olympia, Arcadia Middle School, and Odyssey. What are our goals? Really, to create a culture of connectivity where members of the school feel valued and thrive, to encourage personal responsibility, repair harm, and restore relationships. And then really, when it comes to behaviors, we're looking to reduce and not eliminate. We want to be realistic with what we can accomplish, not only this year, but long term. We're never going to eliminate negative behaviors, but what we can do, if we do it right, is to focus on a couple things that research says will produce several desirable outcomes. And those are listed here for you to review as well. And while you're reviewing those, I'll just say that those outcomes come from the research as well. So we've done a lot of time looking at studies from school districts in Oakland, Philadelphia, New York City, different school districts in the UK. And really, when done school-wide, and there's a concerted effort putting into restorative practices, these are some of the outcomes that come from those efforts in those school buildings. Oops. Before I turn it over, I just wanted to say one more thing. This is not something that we feel is going to be like an overnight or flipping a switch to have like significant changes. It's something that we are trying to do programmatically. It's a big effort. We have great cultures in our schools as it is, but we're working on a little bit of cultural change, which it's going to take some time. And I really wanted to just express my gratitude and our gratitude to the staff and the leadership of the 3 different schools. Olympia, Odyssey, and Arcadia Middle School, as well as 3 specific restorative teachers that are going to be a really big part of building capacity with the staff at those 3 schools. So before we just got into the nitty-gritty, I wanted to make sure to thank them. And speaking of the nitty-gritty, I will turn it over to Dr. Baker to get into some detail.
So as Dr. Zaffet said, there are more than, our goal is to reduce, not to eliminate. And there's other things, other initiatives that we're doing to help reduce behavior. So restorative practices isn't the only thing. We have social emotional learning strategies. We have mental health systems. We have PBIS structures around expectations for behavior. So this is just one strategy and approach that we're using in addition to the other strategies that work to reduce. So it's a complex system that we're doing to support behavior and emotional and safety and well-being within our schools. This is our first time, though, where we have systematized restorative. So I say that in the sense of looking at each of the 3 tiers, and so I'll talk about a little bit more about what we mean by each of those as I go through the presentation. We have had restorative practices in the sense of talking about it, as you know, the board members have shared before, for quite a number of years. But this is our first time where we're actually targeting schools, following a model, and looking at each of them versus just offering maybe some centralized trainings. So while we've talked about it for a while, we haven't necessarily approached it in the way that we're approaching it now. I also wanted to draw attention to the fact that while we've talked about restorative practices for about a decade in that way, that this comes back to indigenous practices that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years and as part of their culture, and that schools over the last 50 years or so have sort of taken that and started to integrate that within schools. So it's not necessarily new to schools, but it's newer compared to practices that we're borrowing from the indigenous communities. So part of what we want you all to recognize tonight and for the community to understand is that part of, I think, the misconception with restorative practices is, as you see, there's a list of about 5 things within each tier. So we tend to use the term restorative practices really broadly. Oh, we're doing restorative practices, we're implementing restorative practices, which then becomes oversimplified, and really there's targeted interventions within each of these tiers. So it's not just one thing, which makes it really complicated in the sense of clarifying exactly what it is that we mean. So we hope to do that a little bit more for you all tonight. So the first is tier 1, and so as a reminder, when we think in tiers and triangles, the bottom of the tier is what we're doing for all students in all classrooms. So that's a school-wide classroom approach that we're doing. And so one example, you'll see there's about 4 things listed there, but one example of a tier 1 approach for restorative practices would be community circles. And so you'll see there's a definition there that's right from our code of conduct. And it's talking about how an intentional practice that usually involves sitting in a circle, sometimes with a talking stick or talking piece to really honor the voice of everyone that's sitting in the circle, and talks about balance within that circle. So sometimes it could be talking about, it could be just a way of building community, of just talking about something silly like, you know, what's your favorite thing to do on the weekend, or maybe would you rather type of topic that can sort of, people can laugh together and be in community, or could actually connect back to curriculum. It could be something where an ELA teacher talks about a book and they do a circle of what's the character you connected most with. And so everyone gets to talk about something that they connected with a book. So it can actually relate to curriculum within a school. So an example of how we've done this, this is where we've been living most of the time, is offering trainings for teachers to learn about how to conduct that type of circle within their classroom to build community, but it hasn't been systematized. So it's sort of like, come if you want. Teachers have been willing and sort of volunteer to go through that training, but that's part of you know, why that may or may not have the teeth that we hoped it would, because it has been optional and not necessarily targeted to one school. So just as an example of that is at Arcadia Middle, with current staff in the building that have gone through our 2-day training, there's only 7 staff members that have gone through our 2-day training on restorative practices. At Olympia, there's 15, and at Odyssey, there's 2. So that just shows we're targeting schools and talking about this, but we have a lot of work to do, just even with training in those identified schools, to get movement and momentum around this type of practice. So we were going to show a video. It's linked in there. We're not going to mess with that audio tonight. But there is a video that is linked in there that we could send out in a different way to just show an example of what a community circle might look like within a classroom. For Tier 2, again, there was lots of different interventions within a Tier 2 practice, but this is something that's more of a targeted intervention for some students or to actually problem solve an issue. So an example of that would be a peer conference or peer mediation. That's not necessarily a new concept. School counselors, for example, sit 2 students down in their offices all the time and mediate an issue that they disagree on and work towards a resolution. So this is actually systematizing that in a different way. Specifically, we are training small group of peers to be able to run that at Arcadia Middle School. So peers can actually facilitate low-level conflict and get students re-engaged back in class. So we talked to the Arcadia Middle School staff, Amy Milton, who's been running peer mediation over at Arcadia since the spring of last year. Around April, they got students trained and engaging in these types of practices. And sent a data point that they shared is that 1 out of 45 students had re-engaged in physical aggression after being mediated. So there's only 2% actually engaged in a conflict after that mediation. So that was just a quick, after 2 months of seeing that happen, definitely saw reduced recidivism of any conflict between students. So an example of questions that might be asked in that type of setting is, what happened? And so both sides get to share their perspective around what happened. How did it impact you? And what do you need to move on? So both sides get to answer that in terms of how to actually repair and restore harm within a conflict that might have happened between 2 individuals, or it could also be problem solving as a class. If there was a substitute teacher, for example, and there might have been a little bit of rowdy behavior in a classroom, how can we actually repair so next time there's a sub that we don't have this issue? And so students would have the ability to talk about that as a classroom, or it could be, how do we help resolve hallways? So for example, the students tonight talked about how they feel the hallways are better, and so a solution like that coming from students could come out of a problem-solving circle within a classroom or some other setting. And lastly, actually, let me just make one more point, I'm sorry. Part of what is important about this is that when it gets to Tier 2, it can occur simultaneous to an actual traditional consequence. So you'll see in here the term skill building alternatives to suspension. And I think when I reflect back at our part of the other way that we have implemented over the years is that we wanted to build in skill building into students who are getting a traditional ISS. And so really the intent of that is they're not just sitting in ISS and doing homework and being quiet, they're also getting skills taught to them within that room so that we're lowering the likelihood that they will have recidivism and reoffend again in terms of doing the same behaviors. So I think the word alternative is confusing in the sense that it seems like it's an either or, but they are still serving an ISS suspension and getting some skill building in addition to that. So I bring that up because Tier 3, it's similar. So students who might participate in a re-engagement circle, so our Peer Accountability Council is a good example of students that go before a jury of their peers. They have a traditional out-of-school suspension during that time, and that they have to complete, in addition to the consequences that they were giving at the hearing process, all additional sanctions that their peers are giving them. So they might have to participate in another mediation, another restorative circle. They might have to do community service. They might have to write letters of apology, in addition to serving the out-of-school suspension. So really, it's holding still a high level of accountability, but also repairing harm and learning. So in addition to that, there's skill building sessions that they're going to while they're over at Phoenix Academy, where they're learning alternative ways of managing conflict. So I think that's part of what we wanted to share in terms of one of the biggest myths about restorative practices is that it's lowering accountability. It's actually in our opinion, raising that level of accountability because there's a responsibility to help repair the harm that's been caused versus just being out of school and then returning after the suspension's completed. So I'm turning over to Shannon, who is one of our district-wide restorative TOSAs, to share about the specific work that we're doing in those targeted schools.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So as you can see, we have some next steps, some things in front of us that we are ready to get going on. The first thing that we are doing is establishing teams that meet on a regular basis at each of the targeted schools. Each of those teams will be led by a TOSA. We have Des Pernicelsi here tonight from Olympia. And I will be helping to coordinate the meetings and to support those TOSAs back at their buildings. And each of the teams will be composed of various stakeholders so that there's representation from all different sorts of people in the school building. We have developed a needs assessment to find out where our needs are at, and those needs assessments are being conducted as we speak over the next week or two. Some of the things on the needs assessment can be sampled here, trying to get a sense of how many people have participated in the training, you know, collecting data and analyzing that data, and that's the work that will be done back at the team level as well. We are also partnering with Center for Youth, as I'm sure you've heard before, but we're gonna try to be a little bit more targeted with our work with Center for Youth. We are currently training students to assist with facilitation. We trained students over the summer to facilitate circles, to be a part of peer mediations, and to serve as peer jurors for our peer accountability council. And we want student voice in more of the things we do because we can see that even as you saw earlier with the Odyssey students, they want to be part of the solution. Kids listen to other kids, and when we hold them to high standards, they really will meet those standards. And in doing so, they learn a lot in the process. So these are some of our next steps, and I'm happy to take any questions if you'd like, and my team back here. So thank you again for having me.
Mr. Butler?
Thanks very much for the presentation. I wanted to mention a couple things. I like the data-informed approach and how you shared that. I also especially appreciate the skill-building approach that this is not only going to benefit the students in school, but in the rest of their lives and in our community if they're better able to resolve conflicts when they inevitably arise. So I think that's great. One thing that I was curious about was you mentioned the relatively low numbers of people you have trained in restorative practices in the targeted schools, and we know that practice change is hard, and wonder what your plans are for getting the staff excited about this, because it is, as you said, a big change.
So part of that is we're relying a lot on our building level TOSAs because they sort of have a temperature of what people's misconceptions are in the building. I know, Sean, you, as your closing comments last time, is thinking as a community member that maybe it's just community members who don't understand what it is, but our educators don't understand either because we've implemented in a different way over time that's led to confusion, like I talked about. So some of it is helping the staff understand these same concepts that we're talking about around what it is and what it isn't. And really, we're offering trainings that are centralized again, but really trying to target those 3 buildings to get more membership there. And then also, we have our TOSAs that are trained, some are trained and some are getting trained to offer that as some optional PL happening in the building. So with those, no other building has those 3 additional staff members that are utilizing that way. So we hope that that will help to increase the number of staff members who go through the training. But it is key that it's a choice and that they're wanting to learn about it, because forcing people to come to that isn't going to change behavior. So we want people who are really excited and want to learn, those early adopters, to come in and give it a go and hopefully see success that leads to other people wanting to join.
I'll just add one thing. Last year we had our code of conduct structure, as you know, was 4 full days. Each building had a GTA rep and the principal there. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that came out of that from the whole group was a desire to learn more and I guess implement more and explore restorative practices more. So we know that the want is there already. We also have feedback and exit surveys from the groups that have gone through the circle training, and one of the most frequent responses there is a desire to learn more and implement more and have assistance in kind of using them in whatever their role is. So we know that the interest is there. I think it's on us and on this project with this targeted approach to capitalize on that and figure out the best ways to make sure that we're getting the most people in as possible.
If I could just add one, I think the concept of creating like a learning community around the restorative practices, so because people are gonna try things and they're gonna make mistakes. It's not gonna go well, and so that idea of getting people to persist in it, I think is a really important part of it, because as you said, those effects are really impressive, but they're contingent upon an implementation with fidelity across the whole system, right?
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of learned that over the last couple of years that we've been giving the trainings, and now with the targeted approach, we will have restorative TOSAs in the buildings to coach. So that's a key thing that's going to, I think, make things work a little bit better.
Thank you. Mr. Malloy?
Is the only buildings that are identified, they have TOSAs, they're the ones that have the TOSAs?
The three that we're talking about, yes.
The other buildings don't have any TOSAs?
Not-
Oh, not for
Correct.
that?
Yes, correct.
So that's why it's being just rolled out to targeted schools? And-
Yes, and the other part of that is starting small to really grow. So a lot of what we've learned over the years with initiatives, if we go holistic, we don't really see the change that we hope to see, or it gets hard to support. So that's the other reason. They have the TOSA so we can support with implementation, to Mr. Butler's point, around how to really help it be successful.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Bonagario?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. The answer, I might have gotten my answer in the last slide, but clarify for me. The peer mediators, are they trained by the Center for Youth, by our TOSAs, combination?
A little bit of a combination. So Center for Youth did the training this summer, but last year the training was facilitated by Shannon and Amy Milton at Arcadia Middle School. So they're the only school of the three that's started the peer mediation process. That I think would take a little bit of time for the other two buildings to get organized for that. So I don't anticipate a peer mediation program to get off the ground and running this year, but that could be something that we look at for next year for the other two. So we're really paying close attention to that, specifically at Arcadia Middle School.
Ms. Flores?
Thank you very much for the information that you put together for us. I have a lot of ideas, so bear with me, and I apologize, I got a lot running in my mind, but my main focus is, I know it's new, but it's not new, and we're exploring a lot of different things, and yes, everything takes time. You can't just snap your fingers and fix things, and there's always gonna be behavioral issues. I mean, there have been for years, it's just the way it is. In looking at the restorative things that you are putting into place, there are a lot of times in our community when the question is asked about parental or guardian involvement. The information is outstanding, but I'm curious. I see a lot of pros and cons as I ask this question, because obviously students come from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different support systems. But have we looked at, or are we looking at possibly something in cooperation with what's going on with also offering parents an opportunity to look at that restorative practice, maybe have some feedback with it, or maybe just kind of sit on the sidelines to allow their kids to grow and take responsibility for the things that they're doing. So I'm just curious where we look on that front.
So I think the best example around that is the Peer Accountability Council, because families are directly involved. So they have to sign consent to even go through the process with the peer jurors that are getting trained. They agree to go before the jury of their peers. The family members are there and present when that's happening. Then afterwards, there's usually some sort of mediation afterwards, and a lot of times that might involve families sitting at the tables mediating with other families, because sometimes the conflict is also intertwined within a neighborhood or something that's more complex than just two students. So families, that's like the most in-depth example, but then there's other varying degrees of, if students are participating in mediation, parents are being contacted, to talk about whatever conflict happened and how we're resolving it. So that's another like lower level way that families are being involved as things are happening to that degree, so.
Ms. Farrar?
Okay, thank you guys for doing this. Just a quick question. I know that we're doing the restorative practice and we're using the social emotional learning. Now, last year, we did about a 15-minute part with the school during the homeroom. I know there was a lot of talk about that. This year, we're seeing that we're now doing a 40-minute class of SEL, considered homeroom. That is correct? All students are taking this?
So it depends on the building, the guidelines, so how buildings are implementing that within the secondary is depending on the schedules, because not every single schedule is exactly the same. So it was done through shared decision-making with their school improvement team to decide how they wanted to incorporate the SEL block into their schedules. So the minimum was 15, so some have gone beyond that minimum expectation.
Okay, and just the follow-up to that question. So they're taking this course for 40 minutes, and it's not a graded. So it's not graded even though we're taking 40 minutes out of their classes to do social emotional learning, which seems to be something we may or may not need to do as there's combat on that. Why would we be taking a 40-minute class, even with those students that have been behind after the past few years with COVID? Why wouldn't we be putting them into something that maybe be helping their grades? Because obviously this is not something that's graded. It's not going to help their GPA. It's not going to not either. So can you give a little background as to why it would be a 40-minute class during instruction time when instruction time should probably be used for something different?
So I think that's connected, but not exactly to this. I think if it's a restored, some are using the SEL block to do some tier 1 circles, like we talked about, for actual community buildings. So, and we've seen in the results that that does help the learning process when you feel safe, you feel connected, you're taking risks with learning. So sometimes you're afraid you're going to get an answer wrong and you're going to be embarrassed. And so we actually see it helps student achievement when you feel safe to take risks within in the classroom. And if you fail and make a mistake, that no one's going to make fun of you for that. So that's part of what we're talking about with the community, is that there's risks and failure with learning and that we're setting the tone for that. Also, the SEL block is specific to conflict resolution skills or self-awareness. So it's also directly helping with students to think about, gosh, when I get something wrong and I get frustrated, how do I resolve my frustration? What's a coping mechanism that I can do? Which is directly tied to to how students learn, which we learned with Soretta Hammond this summer, that when I really struggle with something, how do I overcome that struggle and keep being resilient to keep learning even when something's hard? So those are the skills that they're learning in those blocks that have had connections with increases in achievement.
Okay, do you have a follow-up?
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Being that this is piloted in Olympia, in Odyssey, and I apologize, I forgot it.
That's not really a follow-up, Ms. Farrar. It wasn't to the same question you were asking. A follow-up would be to that topic. If you're just talking about different buildings, it's not.
Well, I just said 3 words, but I will get there. So Olympia, Odyssey, and I apologize, you said that, but I was interrupted. How many kids are actually taking the program or the SEL block for 40 minutes at these schools? Do we have a number? Since
I mean, Ms. Farrar, I think you're confused between SEL and RTE a little, or, I'm having a stroke, don't bother me. Between SEL and this program, restorative practices. I mean, they're 2 different things.
yes, it is, and it says the Code of Conduct through restorative practices will emphasize the CRE and SEL. So my question is in line. Do you know how many kids actually are going to be taking this in the social emotional learning for these classes, since it is an implement?
So I'm going to answer that question. So there isn't, every student in this district gets SEL. So that is something that across the board, social emotional learning and competencies are talked about. They're actually graded in the elementary report card. The work habit section is all aligned with competencies. So across the board, SEL, I do separate it from this topic. Not to say that the work that was just described here is absent of SEL, but what they're describing is the restorative work that they're going to be targeting this year at those 3 schools. So I think you're talking about a time period in the high school schedule, which is like taking us to a completely different presentation and top. That, I think they're different.
Okay, well, you more than welcome to follow up with that. Thank you.
Mr. Bonnegorio? I want to follow up on another question regarding the peer mediation. What kinds of, you gave a little bit of a description of what kinds of incidents might result in peer mediation. Who makes those determinations? Is it district-wide? Is it made at the building level? How does that work? Just flesh that out a little bit, please.
Yeah, they would be primarily made at the building level, depending on the situation, the students involved, what's the context, whether each member is willing to participate in a restorative, conference or a peer mediation. So there's different factors that would go into it, but the decision would be made at the building level.
Any other questions? Mr. Bonnegorio?
And just want to go to the example that you provided regarding community circles, Tier 1. I think the presentation we had earlier from the Odyssey students gives a really nice example of that, the value of building relationship. That's all really wonderful stuff. And it seems like that's the kind of thing that would happen in these community circles. Trust is really important. Are those conversations confidential, kept within the circle? Are we doing any data gathering, collecting information from the students, or is it truly just a safe circle for students?
Yep, so there's norms that are established at the start of every circle that will, maybe just be like whatever happens in the circle stays in the circle. But a lot of times at the Tier 1 level, they're pretty light topics that aren't going to get, so sometimes students will disclose something for their own that they, are willing to do, and that's part of building the trust, is, saying those norms and expectations that that whatever happens in circle stays in circle, and that we're going to respect everyone's voice, and that we're going to limit our time. So those are part of what we establish at the front of the circle by who's ever facilitating it.
Mr. Bonnegorio?
Thank you. Last one, partly, I guess maybe more of a comment. The big takeaway that I got from this is it is not a replacement of traditional discipline. And what I have always heard as being critical to restorative practices is the necessity of having consequences for an offending person to own up to it, to accept accountability and responsibility, and then bringing that to the opportunity for restoration. My personal faith practices hold a high regard for reconciliation. So I think that's really wonderful stuff. And it's really essential to move forward. And so I'm just really encouraged and, by that emphasis that I'm hearing. So kudos on that. One thing that I would hope we can see is that this is married in a concrete way to the code of conduct so that we don't get lax in holding people accountable. I guess we'll see that unfold with time, but I appreciate the presentation.
I just have one question. I had a little synapse misfire, and when you were talking, Dr. Baker, in the Tier 3 intervention, like a student's out of school suspended, and then they come back and they may have to write a letter, they may have to do a start. Is that, and this was what I may have missed, is that part of the discipline, so they must fulfill that? I mean, it's not like I can say, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Right.
Correct?
So they do have to, they opt into it. So their suspension, length is their suspension. If they're suspended for 5 weeks, they're out for 5 weeks, no matter if they participate or not.
Okay.
So basically, the incentive for them to participate in this is they can get up to a 30% reduction if they do all of the sanctions. So they're basically opting in to choose to go and have above and beyond sanctions in addition to their suspension. And then they're basically on pause for their suspension if they come back the 30% early from that, which ends up being a couple of weeks usually. There's still, the suspension is basically paused. If they violate anything within that time, they basically would go back and fulfill the remainder of their suspension.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought, but I wasn't 100% sure.
I would also just point out, as much as, like I appreciate that, our administrators at the school level, even with traditional suspensions and discipline that's happening all the time, are considering things around, as students come back, how do we sort of repair and make things right? It can't be, in that way, it's a really formalized approach and system, but I don't want people to think that that's never considered, because when harm is done and when something's happened and we know the kid's coming back from a suspension, we want to make sure they're entering in and we're doing as much as possible to make sure that situation's been mitigated or repaired as much as possible. And again, I come back to, I really appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the work, because I do see such misunderstanding. And at the root of this is we are always going to see misbehavior. And what we, as much as we do need consequence, we need that repair, and we need learning. And I think that's, you know, at the root of discipline is learning. So if we haven't found ways to get at what happened and how to teach students so that it doesn't happen again, then we're missing the boat completely. So I appreciate the efforts, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the updates as you go this year.
And I'm just gonna wrap up with, I've said it before, and tonight is the first time in 16 years on this board that I've heard I hear restorative. I think I might finally understand it a little bit, so I want to thank the three of you for what you did tonight. I mean, I'm sure I have a lot of work to do still, but, you know, it's been bandied around, but you guys put it into, categories, neat boxes that make it easy for some people to understand, and I truly appreciate that. You know, if nobody else got anything out of it, I got a lot out of it, and I appreciate it. So thank you all.
Thank you.
3.04, lawsuit against social media company, Superintendent Groutman.
Yes, I'm going to have Mr. Smelling come up and do this presentation. We, last year, and he's going to mention this, were able to join a mass tort lawsuit against Juul. At the time, actually, we joined with very few districts, school districts, but to our good fortune, were also awarded a significant sum of money around that lawsuit in terms of how Juul targeted youngsters and what that's led to in terms of really a vaping epidemic. More recently, we were approached around a social media lawsuit. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Smelling to share a bit of context in terms of some of the why behind that and some of our hopes in terms of going forward. And I just share also that I'm proud to be in a district that stands up and does something. So we might not always have the perfect answer or the right answer, but I will say that when we identify a problem, we do something. So thanks for the research that you've done and for leading this effort, Mr. Smelling, and I appreciate the presentation.
I'm watching Joe scramble to find the presentation right now.
Want to talk a little longer?
All right, I think it's here. Well, great. I'll try to wrap up these 5 slides in just about 45 minutes, so I appreciate for just being patient with me. No. So the purpose of this presentation tonight is just to give some additional information regarding the lawsuit against the social media companies, the resolution that you will all be asked to vote on in just a short amount of time. So this, similar to what Kathy just said, this is a nationwide lawsuit where schools have the ability to, through a resolution, to agree to participate in this lawsuit against social media giants like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. And really, this is a lawsuit on behalf of adolescents and teens that have become addicted to social media, and through that addiction have suffered detrimental mental health effects that include anxiety, depression, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, ADHD, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. Kathy mentioned that this lawsuit is very similar to the Jewel lawsuit, where we most recently were awarded just over $250,000. So there's three tenets really to this lawsuit. And the first one is that these social media giants have used addictive psychological tactics to increase usage. And so, for example, what they describe in the lawsuit, they use text messages, emails, and push notifications that the users receive when there's a like or a mention within social media. And what the research has actually shown, that when those dings go off, when those likes or mentions happen, it releases that feel-good hormone dopamine, which is the same hormone that's released when using addictive narcotics. And really what came out in this process is that they were well aware of the impact that these tactics had, and continued to use them to gather more users in their platforms. They've also, another tenet is that they've changed algorithms to collect their data unethically, so that you've artificial intelligence to actually collect and create virtual files on individuals that then is used so that advertisers can really tailor specific advertising to specific users through the change in these algorithms through artificial intelligence. And the last, and as a parent, the scariest, is that they really have worked hard to add features to prevent parents from exercising their rights and duties to monitor and limit their children's use. An example that I learned is that, for those of you that are aware of Snapchat, messages disappear. And so a lot of these platforms have identified ways to hide the amount of access and usage that children are using in a way that makes it very difficult as a parent to monitor. So this information has come out through whistleblowers that have actually brought this to the attention of what is actually going on with these social media companies, and really have shown that they're well aware of the tactics they're using. They're well aware of the impact that it's having, and it has not changed any of their behaviors. So as a result, our students are becoming addicted to social media, and what's scary is it's really driving them towards a mental health crisis. In addition to this lawsuit, the district is beginning to take different measures to push back at this crisis. One of them is Win at Social. This is a variety of series of lessons and modules that give students the skills for navigating social media at the secondary level. Some of this time can be used during social emotional blocks, but we're just starting this work, and I know from some of the feedback that we've received from people using it that it is catching on. And from what I learned about it, they are really engaging lessons that are able to be really already developed that can be used for teachers during times like the social emotional blocks of time. Also, Yonder Pouches was another attempt to limit the amount of access kids have to social media. Phones are turned off or away for 7 hours. And so it hides the dings, possibly, that they would get, that sets off that dopamine. And in some cases allows them with a 7-hour break to maybe break away and not feel the need to break that addiction by the use of the Yonder Pouches. Additionally, we're looking for future opportunities. We see a connection with Leader in Me that is in our elementary schools and starting to broaden itself into the secondary. So there's opportunities in Leader in Me, and our continued look at our social emotional blocks of time in the elementary, which is a lot easier, obviously, and in our secondary areas. So looking at other opportunities to combat this up and coming crisis. And that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Bonagora?
What expense or possible expenses would there be in joining the lawsuit?
Yeah, good question. We did follow up with our attorney, and really, this is a very low risk to no risk at all as far as monetarily. So any monetary winning that we have would be used in the compensation, and if it doesn't match what the attorney fees are, it wouldn't be that we'd be held above any money that we would gain in this. So there really is no risk on our part with this.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, item 4.01, tax cert approval. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Flores, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 7-0. Moving on to 4.02, the small claims rebill. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Vice President Malor, seconded by Mr. Butler. Is there any comments, questions, or concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor. That passes 7-0. Moving on to item 8.01, superintendent goals for 23-24. Can I have somebody move those to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, second by Mr. Flores. Comments, questions, concerns on those? Seeing none, all is in favor. That passes 7-0. Moving on to 8.02, litigation against social media companies. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Ms. Flores. Any comments, questions, or concerns on that? I'm just gonna make a comment. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in this district, is that we discover problems and we take action. Whether it was a Jewel lawsuit, the Yonder bags, adding security vestibules, all the things we've done over the years, we take action to keep our students and our staff and our visitors safe. And this is just one more step, so I appreciate the effort on this, Mr. Smalling, and we'll go from there. You can. Usually before me, but.
I'm sorry, you can say yours again if you want. I really appreciate all that the district is doing proactively to address these issues, some of which President McKeeb was one of the champions of, the Yonder pouch, for example. These are issues that ultimately, I think, become parental oversight issues. I know the reference was made that these companies undermine, take away parental rights. I think in many ways, our own State Department of Education has infringed upon parental rights, and I see that as a more serious concern. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favor? Those opposed? Passes 6-1. 10.0. Oh, 2. Who else voted no? Oh, Mark, you voted no? I voted no. Oh, I missed that. I'm sorry. I just caught her hand. I didn't catch your hand. All right, so it passes 5-2. My mistake. All right, moving on. 10.01.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Is there a second? Mrs. Flores, all those in favor? That passes 6-1. I'm a no.